Hey everybody, what's up? It's Joel, aka The Daily Guru, and today for Gabbing with the Guru, I have an amazingly cool guest with me today. Sitting with me today is Scott Hull, the owner and senior mastering engineer here at Masterdisk in Manhattan. We're going to talk about his history with music, some cool things that he's experienced, and I guarantee you're going to dig this conversation. So what were your earliest memories of music in your life?
Music in the home, music that we would see, but really this big change in my life was the trombone at in fourth grade.
Okay.
Played from fourth grade through all the way through college, classical and legit repertoire, improvisation. From that moment on, music was probably the most important thing in my life.
And from playing that led you to different genres and different styles?
Yeah, I discovered music in different styles of music in different phases. Through school, jazz seemed to be my most immediate outlet, and then sort of through college and post college, then I gave myself some time to figure out what rock was about, and had my obligatory rock band. We played in the garage,
Sure.
and disturbed the neighbors. Between practices, we'd listen to Joe's Garage, and thought that we were as cool as Frank Zappa, though. We clearly weren't. Pretty early on, I dabbled a little bit with electronics. Craig Anderton was but his really early books at that
Sure.
point, and discovered kind of by accident this career that combined performance, technology, and music. In a way that, and at the time there were very, very few places to get further education in that. There was literally one. It was in upstate New York, Fredonia State University. Upstate New York was where they actually had a sound recording technology program. Through that program, I was introduced to Bob Ludwig, who needed interns and assistants in the summer, and I got an opportunity to intern with Bob in '83. Made the most of that by just doing anything and everything, in triplicate that they needed over and over and over again. But some great people. It was a cavalcade of the hits, people coming through the door. It was Genesis, and it was the Police. It was Synchronicity was being made right about that time. So and Hugh Padgham, the well-known producer from England, all of his projects were coming to Bob. I learned really, firsthand at that point that genre didn't really matter all that much. An AC/DC record might be being worked on in the mastering studio, and the next day a Kronos string quartet, or a piano concerto, or some bizarre music from Indonesia, in a Explorer series and
Sure.
such. My indoctrination into mastering was multi-genre, so it seemed very, very logical that I didn't really constrain myself or feel constrained by a style of music.
So then how did you end up at Masterdisk?
Well, the internship went well. I finished my my education and was offered an opportunity to try to build a profile, build a job for myself. There actually wasn't an assistant mastering engineer role or job. But they gave me 3 months to try to figure out what that might be, and and I was paid $5 an hour. But an interesting point was I wasn't actually that crystal clear in my head that mastering was what I wanted to do. Producing, being in the studio, recording was also a keen interest of mine. But it was undeniable that this was where stuff was happening. The big stuff was happening. That I could leave a session and a few days later hear the work on the radio.
Sure.
I assisted and apprenticed under Ludwig until. I gradually got more and more of my own work, but when he left Masterdisk in 1993, I got my opportunity to be in my own room and be a mastering engineer of my own. Donald Fagen record, Sean Mullins record, a handful of other big records, some jazz things. And then a period of time when I decided it was time to kind of go outside of the comfort zone, and I moved my mastering room and mastering operation from 3 different studios, about 2 or 3 years each time, building my clientele, building my collection of gear and my expertise, and eventually an opportunity came for me to come back to Masterdisk to purchase the assets and take over the operation. And many of the same people were here that were here when I started. So it was kind of a natural return to the farm.
In all of those years that you've been mastering and working around kind of the final stages of album production, are there any that really stand out for one reason or another?
I was witness to the change from vinyl to CD. I started before this. We were even talking about CDs. There was some very basic digital recording at those first years, but by and large, that transition from analog recording to digital recording and analog mastering to digital mastering was really significant from a working in it standpoint. Stylistically, it's been an interesting constant transition. It's kind of hard to see it from inside. I did note at one point that it's kind of interesting how the relative loudness of the drums has changed over times, and has changed several times over times. What was considered a loud and very poppy record, at one time, is anyway. So it's been curious to note, but the consumer certainly has, and one of the most dramatic changes from the later CD, after the first 4 or 5, 6 years of CD, techniques and newer consumer concerns got us thinking more and more about making CDs loud.
Right, the loudness wars.
The loudness wars really has become a stand to really mean for this just constant progression of one-upsmanship.
Yeah.
Of I've got a rock record, that came out a year ago, and it's this loud, but someone else has got another rock record in the same genre, and they want, literally for it to be louder, because
One louder.
Like Spinal Tap so eloquently put, if it's got an 11 on it, it's better than if it's got only a 10.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter. Louder in our brain initially makes us think things sound better. Makes us think that there's more sound happening, that it's more profound, that it's more exciting, and oftentimes we translate that to also mean that there's more clarity and that there's more nuance. But in quite contrast to that, if you stop and analyze the way you're listening and the way you're actually hearing, you find that you're losing detail, that you're losing contrast, and that you're losing depth and spatialness by making things louder and louder. The industry as a whole is addressing this slowly, where more and more projects are coming in with producers' concern being, we don't need to be the loudest record on the planet, and that's the key. So it stops being a war. So now it becomes a conversation of how loud's loud enough, how loud, how loud is creatively good for the music.
So with the rise of digital music, whether it was a CD or now that we're looking at mostly MP3s, has there been a change in how artists want the album to be mastered?
The album format isn't kind of in danger.
Okay.
I mean, we had 2 sides of vinyl, and we got pretty good at sequencing and putting songs together. That was a good opener and some good, a second piece that was also strong, a departure piece, and then a closer or so, and then another opening piece, and then the experimental stuff on the B side. So CD took us a while. Has taken us a while to decide how to sequence. The problem there was we decided collectively that more music was better, so we put 78 minutes on a CD and expect the consumer to sit and listen to it. So, the concept of the album was, the first 10 or 12 songs before people hit stop is what the album was. And so then they'd put extra bits and pieces and things that didn't matter quite so much at the end. That's kind of gone away. And for a few years, we've had an album format, a new CD album format that we've kind of understand and know how to sequence and keep people's interest up through 10 or 11, 12 songs. But I see more and more people making music projects, a song or 2 or 3 songs at a time, and not really ever intending them to be together. Not entirely worried about that. It's just it's going from the album format back into a singles format, kind of like where it was before there was an album format. So it's constantly evolving. I don't really think it's technology that moves that. I think that's the tastemakers. If we had another Jimi Hendrix explosion or some type of experience like that, that would lead us into an alternate sort of sound.
So does because it's something that I actually do have a concern about, the persistence of singles, as we're now kind of an iTunes generation where people go on and you don't have to be a great artist because you made a great album. You can be, a top of the charts artist because you had one single and we'll never remember you again. Does that give you concern as someone who loves music for the future of music?
An album has a really big, important role in storytelling music that isn't just one chapter. It isn't just a magazine article, that it's the book. Certain styles of music, I don't think that's really going to go away. Pop music, I think, is probably best not being in an album format. It's no one
Yeah.
can really agree on 10 songs that are going to be commercially successful anyway. And the economics of it now kind of dictate that you kind of put all your eggs in literally in one basket to promote a big success. And there's a couple little problems with technology where iTunes is almost discouraging people from making creative records because we have an issue where we're only allowed to put one version of a particular album up on iTunes. And if a producer wants to crossfade or segue these songs together to make a Pink Floyd-esque kind of performance, well, when someone buys an individual track, it's got a hard, a cut-off end and an abrupt beginning. And that's not a defect of the engineering. That's just a function of that the single that you order has been taken out of the album package, and I've actually had conversations with Apple trying to encourage them to allow us to put single versions up so that when you buy the single version you get that one version, but if you complete my album you get the album version format, because I've explained to them, by and large now almost no one will take the risk of crossfading the songs in their record anymore, and that was huge.
Yeah,
that
the
was
flow.
really, really
You
huge.
get those albums
even
that
if it
just
was
flow
just
so
subtle.
well. Yeah.
But the transition from one mood into another, it doesn't happen.
Through all of the different artists that you've worked with over the years, were there any particularly amusing or just memorable moments on a certain album you were working on?
Masterdisk has always been sort of an open door kind of place, so there's just these great times when artists will bump into each other, being up here working on their same record with different engineers at the same time. I was literally editing a Eric Clapton live 24 Nights record, and Robbie Robertson walked by outside the door and had, Robbie, Eric. It was just like they had, and because they were friends, they hadn't seen each other in years, and we just the two of us in the session just sat there
Sit
really
back and
quietly,
watch.
like maybe if we don't move, they won't notice that we're sitting here. But specifically, working with Donald Fagen has been, and Steely Dan has been very, very interesting. He's well known and for being very particular, and it doesn't stop at the mastering session. We've done revision after revision after revision very patiently and with all great intent to get to the quintessential version that he's looking for. He hears exceptionally well. He can hear the detail in his music exceptionally well. A tenth of a dB of EQ is almost too big of an increment for him. So we're doing microscopic EQ changes. And at first you go like, all right, this is just his ego working.
Sure,
This
sure.
is not really happening. And, busted, when an EQ was in that I thought was out, and he goes, that doesn't sound like it did last time. And I look over like, holy crap.
Wow.
That was the 2/10 of a dB of EQ, and wasn't able to see over my shoulder. He heard it. When you sit and listen to those little microscopic EQ changes, you notice that they translate as sort of balance changes, as if you were turning up the shaker or turning down the clap track or the other percussion. Where it gets comical is that after doing Kamakuriad, made the digital masters, everything was approved, so now make copies for the world. We make copies for the UK, we make copies for South America, we make copies for Europe, and it all goes out to the pressing plants and they start replicating the thing. And then I get a phone call. It's like, I'm not sure how this happened, but like all the drum fills were left off of counter mode. There's all this precision and ability to hear every little detail, and it's just as human as the rest of us. So they called the plants, they stopped the presses, we fixed a track somewhere had been muted while soloing something else, and it had never been unmuted. They heard it over and over the way it wasn't supposed to be, and it wasn't until somebody listened with a different sort of ear.
So you work with all that here. When you're on your time, what sort of music do you like to listen to?
It really is hard because there's such a music overload with me. It would be hard for anybody casually to listen to as much music as I do on a weekly basis. That's not, employed as a DJ or employed in this kind of environment. When I'm not really studying music, I have to kind of keep my ear attuned to what else is going on. It's probably instrumental jazz, where kind of my roots go, where I'll find my happy place. When you have this as your living room, it's hard not to listen critically.
Right, not to
study
music.
That's the other thing.
Absolutely.
So,
over all the years, what keeps you coming back every single day?
That it's a new style or new piece of music, a new person, a new situation almost every day. I've got the Forrest Gump of, like a snowflake, a new experience every sort of day. And even when I the same producer or similar style of music, it's broken up by enough of other projects that it doesn't feel like I'm pigeonholed into a particular thing. But it's passion. So that knowing that I could do it a little bit better the next day as well. That there's some way it could be expressed a little bit better. Vinyl, the challenges of vinyl and the challenges of live in the studio to vinyl and some of these other things are kind of what are pushing me forward to, vinyl has really brought us back to really think about how music was made and why music was made in a particular way. It's really got us thinking, that perfect isn't necessarily the goal, of music. Emotional and intensity doesn't necessarily, connect always with loud, and so all of that. That's what keeps me coming back. If the day I perfectly master something, I guess I'm done.
That's it. Nothing else to do.
Yeah.